You are standing in a dense South forest in the foothills of the Himalayas. It is 1907. The air is thick with humidity and the smell of crushed pine needles under your bare feet. There is no emergency broadcast system. There is no local police dispatch. There is, however, a 400-pound apex predator somewhere in the tree line who has spent the last 7 years treating the local human population like an open-air buffet. So here's the question that should make you slightly uncomfortable the next time you lock your front door at night. Why would a wild animal, a creature with millions of years of evolutionary instinct screaming at it to avoid humans, suddenly decide to hunt us during broad daylight? The answer involves a deeply misunderstood biological mechanism, and once you see the exact chain of events that created the deadliest individual animal in recorded human history, you will never look at a predator the same way again. Let's go to the Kumaon district of northern India, the final years of the 1800s, because this is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable. For the people living in these scattered hills, the forest was not a scenic nature reserve. It was the grocery store, the hardware store, and the fuel depot, all at once. You had to go into the trees to survive. The tiger figured this out, and then she did something completely unprecedented. She hunted when the sun was up. Most dangerous animals respect standard business hours for killing. The tiger erased that line. In 2011, Olis Karanth at the Wildlife Conservation Society published a definitive ecological tracking study on Bengal tigers. The finding was that wild tigers actively rewire their circadian rhythms to become strictly nocturnal in human-dominated landscapes, specifically to avoid us. Yet in 1903, a woman in western Nepal walked out of her home at high noon to collect firewood and simply vanished into the brush. Her death shattered the established biological boundary. The tiger was not just hunting, she was calculating. Think about that. An animal built entirely for the shadows realized we were blind and slow in the light, and deliberately reprogrammed its own evolutionary clock to target the most vulnerable members of our species. But the Nepalese army had something completely different going on. And it is going to genuinely surprise you. Let's talk about the military response. Because the sheer scale of institutional failure here matters more than you currently think it does. By 1904, the death toll in the Nepalese hills had reached roughly 200 people. The government panicked. They deployed the heavily armed contingent of the National Army to wipe this animal off the map. They marched into the dense jungle with rifles, regimental discipline, and overwhelming numbers. They failed. Here is the part that changes everything. In 1993, Peter Boomgaard at the Royal Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies published a historical analysis of lethal human-tiger conflict. The finding was that large-scale state military interventions against single man-eaters almost universally failed, often increasing the death toll by displacing the animal into unprepared regions. The Nepalese National Army marched into the western hills intent on slaughtering one cat. They never even cornered her, managing only to annoy the tiger enough that she swam across the Sardar River into the Kumaon district of India. A mobilized national military was outmaneuvered by a solitary feline. Think about that. We build armies to fight human wars, but when we aim that machinery at a perfect evolutionary apex predator, our rigid tactics become completely useless. Did you know? Between 1900 and 1907, the Champawat tiger averaged more than one human kill every single week. The sheer mathematical consistency of the predation caused the local government to issue rewards worth a decade of wages, a price tag put on a ghost. The government essentially threw a small fortune at the trees and hoped the problem would dissolve. The reason she could outsmart an entire military force is something nobody expected, and it changes everything that comes after. Here's something that should probably make you feel a little uncomfortable. We assume man-eaters are apex predators operating at their absolute peak. We think of them as superkillers who developed a refined taste for human blood. They are not. A healthy tiger eats 600-pound sambar deer and wild boar. To bring down prey that large and fast, a tiger relies on absolute anatomical perfection. In 1944, Jim Corbett published detailed physiological postmortems of lethal predators in his documented field logs. The finding was that out of dozens of verified man-eaters, virtually zero were healthy animals operating at peak biological capacity. Corbett knelt over the body of the Champawat tiger in the summer of 1907 and pulled back her upper lip. He found the canine teeth on the right side of her jaw completely shattered down to the bone by an old, poorly aimed gunshot. She was starving to death. Think about that. We assume man-eaters are malicious demons, but humanity literally manufactured this monster by crippling her natural biological toolkit and leaving her trapped in a forest full of slow, soft prey. Humans are remarkably efficient at creating biological disasters and then acting deeply offended when those disasters try to eat them. But there is still the question of how Corbett actually stopped her. She was not born a monster. She was manufactured by a bullet. Now here's where things get genuinely dark, and a little bit poetic, honestly. Jim Corbett was not a soldier. He was a local who understood the forest better than the animals did. In 1907, A young woman named Primka Debbie went to collect firewood. She never returned. Corbett picked up the blood trail. He knew you do not ambush a tiger. You let the jungle tell you exactly where it is. In 1976, John Seidensticker at the Smithsonian Institution published research on tiger territorial displacement. The finding was that compromised tigers do not roam randomly. They establish highly predictable patrol routes based on the paths of least resistance. Jim Corbett knew this intuitively when he organized 300 villagers to form a human beat in the Chuka Gorge. He didn't chase the tiger. He weaponized the geography and the deafening noise of the villagers to funnel her directly into the open sightlines of his rifle. The deadliest animal in history was not defeated by superior firepower. Think about that. She was defeated by a single local man who stopped treating her like a supernatural demon and started treating her like a predictable biological algorithm. The tiger finally met the one primate in the district who refused to run away. But the man who pulled the trigger realized something standing over the body that forced him to drop his rifle forever. A tiger was shot. A tiger starved. A tiger adapted. She hunted 436 people in broad daylight across 2 countries. An army failed to stop her. A local man tracked the silence and ended a 7-year nightmare with a single rifle. We want to believe that nature is inherently malicious when it turns against us. We want to label animals as monsters because it absolves us of our own clumsiness. The truth is much colder. Nature is a purely mechanical system. When we break a piece of that system, the machine does not stop running. It just finds a new, softer fuel source. We were the fuel. But here is the twist. Jim Corbett did not celebrate the death of the Champawat tiger. He looked at her shattered teeth, realized humanity had created the exact nightmare it was running from, and eventually put down his gun. He picked up a camera. He spent the rest of his life fighting to protect the very predators he was hired to kill. Right now, in the foothills of the Himalayas, the dense green canopy of the Jim Corbett National Park breathes quietly under the midday sun. Deep in that brush, a wild tiger is sleeping in the shadows, entirely undisturbed by the modern world rushing past its borders. She is not a ghost, and she is not a monster. She is finally allowed to be the one thing the Champawat tiger never could be, just a tiger. If this completely changed how you view history, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because next time we are asking why a group of perfectly healthy hikers walked out of their tents in the freezing Ural Mountains without their shoes. The answer is darker than you expect. See you in the next one.